June 9th. Something just, okay. On Saturday, June 19th at 1 p.m., we have an outdoor program titled The History of the Flower Industry in Western New York. So we suggest that you bring your own lawn chair and possibly an umbrella. Now, we could move inside if we have to, but that'll be Saturday, June 19th at 1 p.m. outside. And then we have another program on a Sunday afternoon on June 27th at 2 p.m. titled Grandfather Stories with one of our members, Dave Coons. And that'll be so. I'd like to introduce we have three speakers tonight. JoAnn Ward Snyder has worked on personal genealogy for over 30 years. She has volunteered on several community genealogy projects over the years, including the Mount Hope Cemetery transcriptions and the Rochester Church Indexing Project. She's a member of the Greece Historical Society and recently retired with a goal to preserve the family history of her family. Marie Poinan is a volunteer at the Greece Historical Society and the Charlotte Genesee Lighthouse, where she does exhibits, programs, and writes historical brochures and booklets. She's prepared a grant to secure the historic marker for the Latta Meach House, and that's the house at Latta Road and Lake Avenue. In 2005, she created the text for all of the signs for the Bill Davis Overlook at the site of the former Stutson Street Bridge, and has also supervised the restoration of the historic Charlotte Village Cemetery. And she is the editor also of the Lighthouse newsletter. That is a short description of some of the thousands of things she does. Barb Koehler is, for the past 10 years, as a genealogical specialist at the local history and genealogical department of the Central Library. So, JoAnn, I think you're up first, and I'll turn off my mic and mute me.
Thank you. Marie, can you get your slides up? We have our slides to share. There we go. Tonight, hello and welcome. I'm JoAnn, and we're going to be talking about researching your town of Greece family. Genealogy research is the foundation through which we can relate and tell our family story. And every family has a story to tell. Next slide, Marie. There we go. So the Greece Historical Society, in honor of the town of Greece Bicentennial, is publishing a book on our pioneer families. Those that have settled here for the purpose of our book, honor before 1872, which is the first 50 years of incorporation. The book will be a collection of short stories about individual families with some pictures and about life in the 1800s. So we're gearing for life in the 1800s. We really want community involvement in this project. Some families have been immortalized in the past in stories about the town or on street signs, but we want to hear from all families. So this is a chance for you to participate. Attached to the invitation to this presentation, there is a packet about explaining it, as well as the questionnaire that's on the right side of your screen. The questionnaire is what you would fill out and to find out if your qualifying family is the top part, were they here by 1872, and it tells ways to figure that out. If you can't figure it out, I'm co-editing the book with Marie, we can help you. And then there's some starter questions to get some discussion going within your family and some things that we would like. So as you're listening to this presentation tonight, I'm pleading with you to please consider having your family join our book. Next slide. My portion of the program is the beginner's guide, how to build your family story from your research. And I will just demonstrate through a case study on how I built a story on a family I knew absolutely nothing about. And that was in part in preparation for the book. I went to the Falls Cemetery, as most of you probably know. It's an old cemetery in Greece, has many old burials, and went looking for a family to adopt. And the Renniff family was intriguing for me, mainly because where the arrow is, I like this entry. John, son of Daniel and Mercy, died in 1829 at age 30 years. So he definitely meets the criteria for our book, and it gives Daniel and Mercy as parents to JoAnn as a starting research point. Later on, some other characters in this will be Augustus, Duty, and Milo, who are also in the cemetery. I used census records, next slide, Marie, to go looking for my family. I knew that JoAnn was 30 and died in 1829. So I went back to the 1820 census to see if they were in Western New York. And sure enough, in 1820, I found JoAnn there with a family. And at that point in time, it was just head of households that were listed. So JoAnn was the head of household, and there were ages of people in the household that could include his parents. This says town of Gates, and the reason for that is, even though we're researching Greece, is Greece wasn't a town until 1822, which is what we're celebrating next year. From there, he died in 1829. I went to see where they were in 1830 and who was represented as head of household, and it was Daniel. Daniel was there in 1840. Fast forward to 1850 on the lower right, and that's the first census that lists family members or members of the household with implied relationships. And I found Judy Renniff, who's in the cemetery, but second from the bottom is 80-year-old Mercy. And that's implied that that could be his mother. I learned from this that he's a farmer, so they are farmers, and this is likely their farm that they're on. And then one of my research questions in looking at this family is, where did this pioneer come from? And it says that Judy was born in Vermont. So that's a good place to look. So knowing that head of households are the only people listed in censuses, I put in his dad's name, Daniel Renniff, in Vermont. And what popped up was the 1790 census for Linden in Caledonia County, Vermont. Fifth from the bottom is Daniel. But this is where, when you're inquisitive and put your detective hat on, this census is the entire town, only a dozen households and 59 people. Why is that? So next slide. I went to books and newspapers, and in the middle there, in a book on Linden, Vermont, I found that Daniel was a founding member of Linden, Vermont. He was an elected official, and also that the first town meetings were held in his log farmhouse, log cabin on his farm. I also found through newspapers that he sold his farm in 1811, which goes along with their 1820 arrival. Another research question that I had back in Greece was, how long did the farm stay in the family? And through censuses through 1940, which is the last available census for our view, the family is still on a farm in Greece. In newspapers in the mid-1840s, I find Milo, who's also in the cemetery, trying to find a way to make use of that last 28 acres of their 78 acres of land. And he wants to put an open-air movie theater there, also known as a drive-in theater. That, for some reason, fell through and is now up north of Ridgeway on Long Pond. But I was able to also find through the newspapers that that farm was there till the 1960s in their family's name. The reason why that is important is it was in the family for 150 years, which makes it a century farm, where they occupied that piece of land from probably 1811 to about 1961 or 62. So that's good information for your story. And there's more to newspapers than obits. On the right, I found the jackpot of all stories, in that I found an article about Mrs. Frances A. Walker, who turned 90 in 1932. And she is interviewed about her life. And she talks about her great-grandmother, Mercy Renniff. Now, this lady was born in 1842, and she talks about her great-grandmother Mercy talking about coming from their farm in Vermont in covered wagons across New York State, stopping at Saratoga Springs to taste the waters, which they enjoyed very much, to settle in Western New York as one of the very first pioneer families. So very good information if you dig. Not all information that you're looking for is going to be found. I can't find a death record for either Daniel or Mercy or a cemetery stone. I like church records and they're nowhere. So to expect to find hits on every resource that you look, that's an unrealistic genealogy expectation. So the next thing I like to use is maps. Maps can tell you a lot. And then the Renifs were in 1852 on some land in Greece, and they were in the same place in 1872. This is a map of Long Pond Road, north to south, top to bottom. The street going across the top is Maiden Lane, and the street going across the bottom is Ridge Road. So they were just north of the ridge. And actually the current location would be approximately near Hamilton Manor and the elementary school there, if you are from the area and are familiar with that. The other thing this record tells us is we know this is Duty, who we saw in 1850, had the farm and he was a farmer, but a portion of it was sold off to what I know is his son Augustus. The other interesting thing is we have a new use for the land. There's a sawmill there. When you're looking at maps, always look at neighbors, transportation, and what things were in that era. A lot of times family members married into other nearby families. It's not unusual for farm frontages to be sold off to other family members. So take a look at that. Next page. Other valuable resources in the community are the historical societies and town historians. They collect information that people give them. They look for newspaper articles. There might be stories written about your family, pictures, inquiries. So they're always a good place to check. And I did check them in Greece, and some of the information they had, I already had, but there was this nice article written by Alan Mueller about the sawmills of Greece, New York, also mentioning Augustus's sawmill, and that it was working until the early 1900s. So information found. From Linden, Vermont, I was able to get this very nice picture of Daniel's farm. And in the place where his log cabin was, that has subsequently burnt down, there's a marker done by a Civil War soldier to commemorate the location of the first town meeting of that town. So very nice information. And then hopefully you can see by this case study how I was able to put together from no information at all, a family I didn't know, a pretty nice story. So it's the start of one. It took a few weeks. It's not something you do overnight, but it's there. So in conclusion, for my part of the presentation, I have some tips when you're researching and thinking about writing a story. Concentrate on one family at a time. Talk to and write to family members. Don't reinvent the wheel. See what you have, pool your resources, and maybe pool together, make it a family project. Analyze your collected research, find your holes that you need to prove or records that you need, and research them. Also pool your photos. In these days and age, nobody needs to hoard them. We can scan them. And then preserve your legacy. In 50 years, no one's going to be looking at your JEDCOM, your family tree maker, or your 100 files of paper to learn about their family. But if you write a story, and it doesn't have to be as formal as a book, it could be just a few pieces of paper or a pamphlet, you can save your family legacy for the future. And I hope that this will encourage you to, if you do have a pioneer family in Greece before 1872, that you will consider being part of our book project. So next page, Marie. So I encourage you, if you're interested in this, fill out the questionnaire that's attached or on the Greece Historical website, put your charts, your family stories, what you have. If you want to write a story, go ahead and do that. It would, if it's chosen, it would be edited for content in the spirit of the time that we're looking for at the 1800s and space. If you don't want to write your story, would like Marie and I to craft it, send us information and it might be considered. With the pandemic, we're on a short timeline. We got a late start. Deadline is July 31st. And if the sun, moon, and planets all land up, we will publish in November of 2021. So hopefully you will be interested in this. Next up is Barb Koehler. And as Bill said, she is the genealogy specialist from the Central Library. She hosts weekly online genealogy forums for Rochester Public Library. She also holds one-on-one sessions with people who need help with researching their brick walls. And unhappily for us, but happily for her, she's retiring at the end of the month. And I personally would like to thank her for all she has done in that role and in her various volunteer roles for helping preserve history for the future of this community.
Thank you, JoAnn. Thank you. So my this talk, I'm going to try to, I'm not going to have time to demonstrate all the things that are on the hand, but I tried to give you links to access all of these different record sets. And what I chose was maybe what I would consider at least the top 5 categories of records that you should be consulting when you're doing your family history research. First of all, the 2 major suppliers of records and resources these days are FamilySearch.org. That's the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's a free website. It's always free. In some cases, there are limitations about the records that you can view, but they have the most historic records, the oldest records that are probably available. Second to that would be Ancestry.com. And if you don't know, because of the pandemic, the Greece Public Library and many of the other town libraries have been offering free remote access to Ancestry.com while the libraries were closed, and that offer is still ongoing. We're checking now to see how long that agreement lasts, but if you don't have Ancestry.com, now is the time to get yourself into it because it's free to use. And the library edition of Ancestry.com includes the international records. So it's not just the domestic records that the basic Ancestry subscription has. So if you do have a subscription and you only have the US Discovery package, by using the library edition of it, you can also access international records. So go over to the Greece website if you're a Town of Greece resident and check it out. They just need your library card number and they verify that you live within the Town of Greece. If you live in the city, we offer it from the Rock City Library website that I gave you. Or if you live in another town in Monroe County, check with that library to see, what their access is for it. But it's just an amazing resource. It has a little bit of everything and a lot of everything also. So on to the categories. Most of these JoAnn used in her research. So just to give you a little background on them, federal census is just the #1 record, I would say at this point, that we use. And if you've used it before and you go back and check it again, you'll probably see something you missed the first time. But the years it was taken, it has been and still is being taken every 10 years, starting in 1790. And it's of course taken by the federal government and released by the federal government 72 years after it's taken. So next year we will be getting access to the 1950 federal census. 1940 came out in 2012. So stand by for that. When it first comes out, it will, Ancestry and all the other providers of access to the census will be recruiting volunteers to index it, but in the meantime, it will be browsable and searchable. So, and that's just a great thing to be prepared for. The second major category, I would say, are city directories. Now, this doesn't directly affect towns like for this project, Town of Greece, but if you're working your way back from your direct ancestors, getting all the way back to your great-greats and so forth, these may come in handy. So you can see on here the years that are available digitally online at the library's website. We're actually working right now to get the fill the gap between 1947 and 1950 before the census comes out next year, so that you'll have that to use also. Suburban directories were not published until 1930. So the very oldest one is 1930, unfortunately. So we have those from 1930 to 1940 online, and later years are in person in the library, or Ancestry does have them. when Ancestry isn't available to you remotely, consider Heritage Quest. They have a partnership with Ancestry, and with your Monroe County Library System library card, you have access to that anytime, also for free from home. So the next record set, Vital Records. New York State did not require registration of birth, marriage, and death until the 1880s. So prior to the 1880s, you'd have to pretty much rely on church and cemetery records for those, for documentation of those events. So, there are several, I got them on here, several websites that provide this information. The Rochester Genealogical Society has digitized cemetery and church records online on their website that you see here. It's on the handout. And when you go into that website, included in the images that they have digitized, they also have a volunteer project. It's been going on now for several years, where they are actually transcribing church records into a database that you can access to. You'll see another tab for that when you get in there. So check that out. The Monroe County Gen Web, we have an especially active Gen Web if you've never heard of it. This has all kinds of records critical or very important to genealogy. I use it probably every day for cemetery records because there were a couple of times back in the 1980s and perhaps even earlier where people actually walked every cemetery in Monroe County and transcribed headstones into a record that's online. In my own case, my great-great-grandfather died in the 1880s, and there's a transcription on there of his headstone that when I go there today, it's unreadable because the elements have worn it away. So had these folks not done this back 50, 60 years ago, it would have been lost to history. So it's just a great resource to be able to use for headstone as well as other cemetery records. So check that out if you get a chance. That's on there. And if you're researching outside of Monroe County, there is a US Gen Web that can take you to other counties in New York State or anywhere around the country and many other places around the world. So it's a great resource. It's always free. Okay, next. Newspapers. Newspapers is a hot topic these days. Lots of people are digitizing newspapers. And so there's a number of resources available. Downtown, we have newspaper clipping files from about the 1940s through a few years ago. They stopped clipping them because there's so many digital versions that are easier to use now. But there are physical clipping files down there from the earliest newspapers in 1817. So you can see that's even before Rochester became a city. So, some really great history there. And then I've given you some other opportunities here. This New York State Historic Newspapers is from all over New York State. So if perhaps in the case, JoAnn's example had someone coming from Vermont, but if someone came from somewhere else in New York, you might find some old records that way. Plus they have some unusual newspapers. They have the Catholic Courier on there. They have the Grease Presses on there. So it's some of the smaller papers that, not everything is the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune. So this gives you a chance to search some smaller newspapers. And my last example is maps and atlases. You saw that from JoAnn also. There are a number of digitized maps on the library's website. Just choose the second bullet when you follow this link that I have here, and you'll see what the options are. Some of them are quite old, and I know it includes the example that JoAnn had as well. So frequently we're trying to deal with jurisdiction changes, like you saw. There could be a person that was living in the house in 1820 and they were living in Gates, and a couple of years later they didn't move anywhere, but they were in Greece. So you kind of have to keep track of those details sometimes and acquaint yourself with local history or state or American history just to kind of understand what the jurisdiction was officially when the person lived and where. So that was everything I had. Sorry, I was blazing through that so fast, but I hope you got everything you needed, at least out of the handout. So Marie is up next, and she's going to take you through how the Greece Historical Society is fulfilling its mission of saving the past for the future. So take it away.
Hey, everybody. My job is to get you to put on your thinking caps and start thinking about where you might be able to find information on your family. At Greece Historical Society, we collect information and record it for future generations. But we also use that information from these collections to create displays and create literature and do programming such as what you're visiting with us tonight. And this all preserves our local history. All of the photos that you're going to see are from the collection of the Greece Historical Society. And I'm just going to take you through some examples of where you might be able to start looking for your family. Take a look at your family photographs. When we got this photograph at Greece Historical, it's a very nice picture of the Wheelahan family. However, nobody was identified and there was no date on the picture. So we had to do some investigating to find out the family and how to get a hold of them. So the idea is, if you have family pictures that you don't know anything about, do some investigating, ask your relatives and they might have pictures. Or if you go on Ancestry, somebody else may have posted the same exact picture that you have in your family's collection. Do you have a picture of a young person in your family? Do you have their wedding photo? This is from the Lemke collection, and the two people on the left were not married to each other. They wound up getting married. And then there's a photograph of a family that got married on the right-hand side. Going to newspapers, these can be an invaluable, I hate to sound like a broken record like everybody else, but I use them practically every day to find out invaluable information or details about an event that you might have heard something about in your family. The Dobsons had read an article in the newspaper about their barn burning down. So actually, Bob Dobson wound up going to Barnard, where they had a photograph. The photograph on the left is them fighting the fire. And they also took the photograph on the right-hand side after the barn had burned to the ground. So actually, absolutely invaluable. Now, the other reason you might want to go to a newspaper is to confirm something that you've heard in your family lore. Ron Carlton had heard that there were 7 children born on their Long Pond Road farm before the family moved. So he found this article from 1902 saying that the family had lived there for 18 years. And he also knew that they lived on the Loudon farm. So Arthur and Myrtle Lemke had rented the farm north of Frank Loudon's big house, which is across the street from the Historical Society. And he had worked for Mr. Loudon, and this was the tenant house. So the house they lived in was part of his pay. Do you have military records in your family? Here's some military records from people who died during the Civil War from the town of Greece, and 2 that you might recognize. At the top, Felix McGuire's nephew died, and also Christopher McGee, which you may not recognize that name, but his mother was Ann Tiernan from the Tiernan family. So on the right-hand side, the information that was invaluable here is the fact that it gave where these people were buried. It not only said when they died and where they died and gave the regiment that they served in, but it also said the top one, Mr. McGuire was buried at Andersonville. Mr. McGee died at Richmond and he was buried in Richmond. So if you went looking for them in Mother of Sorrows Cemetery, they wouldn't be there. They died during the war. So that's another source that you can look at. Do you have a photo of your family's house? Anywhere. The Lemkes lived in a tenant farm on the Loudon farm that has since been torn down. Here's the photo on the right-hand side from 1928, which shows the house that they lived in. And the interesting part was that Simon Butts married Elizabeth Loudon, who died at age 30. He then married for his second wife, Sarah Ellis. They had 6 children, and the Loudon house that you see on Long Pond Road today was built as a wedding gift for his daughter. check your photos for hidden gems. In this photo from Ron Carlton, he had the Lemke kids on their property. What's in the background but the Loudon house in 1940. And it's a very early view of the side of the house, which you never see. You usually see only the front of the house. So that was an invaluable addition to our collection. What about a family photo of a building that no longer exists? Here's the Dobson farmhouse on Denice Road. The barn is still there, but the house has long since been torn down. Do you have any marriage information about your relatives? A marriage license might be valuable in the fact that it will identify the names of the parents. Here in one of the Lemke editions, Floyd Beatty married Frances Hadlick, and we didn't know who Frances's parents were, but from their marriage license, we found out that she was the daughter of James Hadlock and Mary Perrin. What about immigration records? Where did your family come from? Did they come to the US early on? Did they come later on? And when did they, if they were in New York State, or when did they come to the town of Greece? Did they come from Massachusetts? Did they come from Vermont or maybe Connecticut? Also consult anything that your family has in its possession in terms of family diaries, Bible records, letters, or memoirs. From one of our photographs, a letter that we found out that Henry Moore, which probably nobody recognizes that name, and I know I didn't, he ran the store at the northeast corner of Latta and Long Pond Road, but that was written up in the family diary. On the right-hand side, Marilyn wrote about her Loudon family in a memoir that we have at the Greece Historical Society. And it's a wonderful tribute to her family. Do you have school photos? These are early photos. Unfortunately, the kids aren't identified, but it talks about what school district they belong to. Newspapers, once again, obits, funeral cards are very valuable. It shows when Myrtle Lemke died and that she left 119 descendants. So that's a fun afternoon of hunting. Do you have a photo of a family car? On the left, here's one that was on the Dobson farm, and the barn in the background is the one that burned down. And on the right, Ron Lemke's standing with his first car. So you never know when you're going to find a valuable picture. Don't forget about the cemeteries. We always start going to look at cemeteries. We have so many in the town: Falls, Mother Sarah's, Frisbee, and Loudon, the small family cemeteries. And we also have to remember about the Shalott Cemetery too. When you really hit the pay dirt, you get a family portrait. I always love family portraits. I love the ones with the wheel of hands that you saw at the very beginning. And here's the Lemke from the 1800s when they had just come over from Germany. They are with their kids. And then there's their grandchildren who took the photograph on the right-hand side. So maybe you have a formal photograph, but sometimes you don't luck out. Sometimes it's not too formal, but it's interesting nonetheless. So this is one of my favorite photographs. When you're doing your research, if your family was from the town of Greece, you also have to remember that Shalott became a village in the town of Greece in 1869. So to the south, we also had Hanford and King's Landing, which was in the town of Greece. So some of the early surnames that you might equate with Greece today actually settled in Shalott to begin with. What you want to do is start establishing a timeline of what you know and what you have to find out. Find the dates out for your family, and then eventually, this is a pedigree chart that has been completely filled in and was submitted to us for the book. But it also takes back both sides of the family. But everybody's got holes in their family, but it gives you an idea of what you have and what you need to go search out. So once again, I just want to reiterate that the deadline is July 31st to submit your questionnaire and your pedigree chart. And we'll do the book. It'll be published in November. And we're trying to limit off the top to 2 pages plus a page of photographs or maps or whatever you might have. I know it's going to be kind of hard to check to get things from, the late 1800s, but we'll do the best that we can. And we're here to help you assemble, as JoAnn said. Anytime you need help with any of this, just shoot us an email or write to the Historical Society. We're happy to help you out. So we'd like most of our photographs to be from the 1800s, from the 19th century for the book, but we understand that you might have to give one that's later on the descendants of the family. But you can also do a then and now. If you have a picture of the house that your family lived in, you could use that. Here's a very, very old picture of the Parma Union Church at the corner of Vada and Manitow Road. And on the right is what it looks like today. The picture on the left was from 1903. It was in a scrapbook that a friend of mine brought to me at one of our programs. She had bought it at a garage sale, and it was done by one of the Kirk family. So I hope you'll join us in July and August. We've got 2 outdoor sessions. We've got them on July 11th. They're both Sunday sessions, and August 8th. And Holly Canham is signed on. She's with us tonight. She's the one in the center here. And the 3 of us will be answering your genealogy questions, or bring your information and we'll help you fill out your charts. So all that we ask is, since it's outdoors, that you bring your own lawn chair. Hopefully sun will be shining that day. We won't have to do it inside. So I want to thank my co-hosts and to Kathy from the Greece Public Library for hosting our program. And, it's so important that you share your family history with the Historical Society so that future generations can enjoy it. So that's the end of our program. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll be happy to entertain any questions. So Kathy, take it away.
All right. If anybody has questions, you can put them in the chat, and we will get everybody's questions answered. And when you got your link to the program tonight, you should have gotten the handouts that they mentioned. If you didn't, I will probably resend them again when I let you know that the program is up on the Greece Historical website.
Come on, somebody's got to have a question here. We couldn't have done that good of a job.
Got everybody thinking, that's all.
We did some research with our family, my sister and I do have one of my great grandfathers I think he died in Greece, and he was born, I don't know if he was born in Greece, it says New York, in 1875 and died in 1938. I think he might be in the Falls Cemetery.
Nice. We did get somebody who said, well, I'm inspired to submit my Weir and Hayward family information. And Sue asked, my family was in Greece in 1850, but I have no pictures. I only found on census and death and birthday. Would you still want that for the book?
I think if you contact us privately through the contact information on the questionnaire, fill out as much as you can. And that questionnaire may lead you places that we can make enough to do a story. I did have one family that was short on story. They led a very clean life, weren't in the newspapers, a variety of things. But what we're able to find for them was a declaration of intent, first papers for citizenship, and final papers listing several prominent Greece men signing that he was a good citizen. So we ended up making up the deficit and turning that into a civics lesson on how in the 1800s you would become a citizen of the United States. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. So we can look at what you have and figure if we can figure something out. But I do have my own families, a couple of them where my families want to be involved, and there's just not enough information at this moment in time to pursue it.
But at least you still have that information for your own family.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm the opposite. I've got all the information and nobody's got any pictures. So I'm contacting a cousin who was the a descendant from one of the first sons that we didn't even know the two of us existed. I found her on Ancestry and pursued it. And I said, oh, you're the missing son. So, I mean, now we're in contact all the time. So you never know where you're going to find information. But like I say, go to that 1872 map. And that's what we're using for the criterion. If your family's on there, not every family is going to be on there, but if you found your family on there, chances are we can find out more information about them.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions? Sue said she found them on the 1872 map.
That's great. That's great. Well, like JoAnn did with her Rudniff family. I had never even heard that name. There's a lot of names. In fact, the very first person who submitted for the book, I knew absolutely nothing about them. I never heard the name before at all. And then after talking with her, we found out that they came here with the Loudon family. So there's a hint that nobody knew, and they settled on the next farm. You look on the map and they're on the 1852 and the 1858 map. There they are right next to each other. And then come to find out, a couple of Loudons married into her family. So you never know when you're going to find something looking that far back. We know there's not a lot of pictures, but that's why we give you options of where to search and what other options that you can come up with to find more information.
The other thing too is if you haven't looked at your family online in newspapers and books and a variety of things in recent years, there's a lot more information that has been scanned and uploaded these days that you can find. So I would go back and revisit your family.
I'd like to put a shout out. You mentioned the GenWeb Monroe County, which has just got thousands of different references. And that's all put together by Dick Helsley, who's also one of our guests tonight. So he's kind of one of the unsung heroes of genealogy in Monroe County. Great resource.
I sing Dick's praises all the time. He knows that we couldn't live without him doing all this research and putting it on.
And under New York State newspapers, we just sent out our first section of the Grease Post, which is not online, and we hope to have that online by the end of the year. But it's up to the scanning people, the time limit. So we got a nice state grant to do that. And, that'll be a nice resource, because even though it's only going back to the 60s, they had a lot of history articles in that Grease Post. Yeah. So.
And newspaper articles and maps are nice pictures too. So if you don't have a picture of the house or the barn or the person, even those articles are fascinating. They substitute well for pictures.
Or ship records.
Yeah, anything that's original.
All right. Well, we don't have any more questions coming in. So I'll let you. You want to think we're all set unless somebody else has any other questions?
Oh, Larry Nelcom said it was a nice presentation. So yes. Coming from an expert.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
If for those of you who don't know Larry, he ran the local history department at Rundell for many, many years. So we've lost a few people. But, yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. I know it's a nice warm evening out. You can go to your reactions there and give a hand clap if you want. That's a or you can also give a thumbs up if you really like the program. So maybe we'll see, Kathy, when next fall comes. We might actually be able to meet indoors. Maybe, right?
Hopefully.
That would be nice.
Oh. I want to thank Kathy so much. She's been hosting our Zoom program since for 1 year now. Yes. We started last June and done a wonderful job. We really, really appreciate it. So,
well, thank you for it. It's worked out well for everybody. We still got to do the program just in a different format. So
that's right. And you've learned a lot, right?
Oh, I have learned a lot. Yes.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you, JoAnn and Barb and Marie. I
Thank
guess,
you.
Thank you and good night.
and join Marie and JoAnn in July and August. Just watch our Greece Historical Society calendar, newsletter, email, however you find out our information. Okay, are we all done?
Thanks, everybody.